Welcome to this week's edition of Focus on Connecticut. I'm Tom Appleby, and this week we're going to talk budgets because we're getting down to the wire at the state legislature. Two frequent guests join us today. Let me introduce them to you. State Senator Toni Boucher is a Republican from the 26th District, and that is Bethel, New Canaan, Reading, Ridgefield, Weston, Westport, Wilton. I hope I didn't leave anything out there. It's so easy to do that with so many. And State Senator Bob Duff, Democrat from the 25th District, Norwalk and Darien. Good to have you both back with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Good to see you, Tom.
Getting down to the wire, as I say. The goal is to try to have that budget in place on time, sometime in May, and then you go home when you're supposed to, beginning of June.
June 8th.
Can it happen?
No, that would be a miracle because we haven't done that as yet in the last several years. In fact, didn't we have a historic 8 special sessions not long ago?
Yeah.
So this truly would be a feat.
But I'm hearing confidence on the part, at least some of the Democratic leaders.
I think we will. The governor has come out with some revisions to his budget.
Just this week.
Some of which I may not even agree with, but I know he's been trying to work with other members of the legislature to help with them. He's working with some of us down here in Fairfield County. I think at the end of the day, whether there's Republican support or not, that there will be a budget and there'll be a budget in place and on time, and that'll be good for the state of Connecticut.
But you're not that optimistic.
Well, you know, and this was well said, it may not have the support on the Republican side. We have to remember that this is a...
May not. It doesn't. Plain and simple.
We'll have to wait and see. We also have some proposals we're going to be bringing out next week to show, in fact, that the state can reduce spending and thereby not taxing again. Unfortunately, in the last session, the public was taxed. Both individual taxpayers and businesses as well. We had a massive $1 billion tax increase, the 4th largest in the country. There was a lot of borrowing that went on, some very irresponsible actions that literally have put us in a position where we're spending more every year in a very bad economic times. In fact, the Connecticut Association of CPAs said we're not going broke. We are broke. No working capital.
Well, because the Republicans next week, as you point out, are going to come up with their budget.
Correct.
And the Democrats, not the governor, a Democrat, but the Democrats are going to have their proposal. Before we get to those, let's get to the governor's. This week he backed off his elimination of the $500 property tax credit and said, let's put back $300. That saying in context, I've done 17 town meetings across the state, and I hear you voters, and that's what you asked for.
I'm not so sure that's what they've asked for, but I would argue that while I understand the importance of the property tax credit, I would also argue that 90% of the people don't know about the property tax credit and also don't know how expensive it is, and also that the folks I represent, many of them don't even qualify for it because by the time they do their taxes or somebody else does their taxes, they don't have, their income is too high to even qualify for it. So, you know, my whole thing about the governor's budget was that, you know, we can all find things that we don't like about it. I mean, it'd be very easy to do that. However, it spreads the pain across the entire state of Connecticut. Toni and I have voted against budgets over the last...
Shared sacrifice.
Well, whatever you want to call it. But
that's what he wanted to call it.
Right, but Toni and I have voted against budgets over the last couple of years for a number of different reasons. But one of the reasons I voted against budgets is because of the fact that they have been bullseyes on Fairfield County. And, you know, just continuing to, you know, come to the trough, take money, and then spread it around the rest of the state without asking anybody else for any help. At least with Governor Malloy's budget, he has asked all the state residents to help. So, you know, he has to keep that covenant of really protecting, you know, Fairfield County from sharing, you know, being the lion's share of the revenue of this kind of the budget that we're facing. Every corner of the state needs to be part of the solution.
And your budget is going to ask for the same amount of money from the state unions. That's what's been said.
Yes, that's correct.
$1 billion a year for the next 2 years.
And Bob was correct. He and I have not supported budgets that increase taxes on the vast majority of the people that are already paying the highest tax burden in the country. In fact, it's the highest combined tax burden in the country. And it's wrong to go there first. On the points that we disagree on, however, we've done some town hall meetings as well. 40 of them, in fact, throughout the state. I've done 5, and I'm planning to do 2 more. And in fact, we're getting a very different message. The public has said unequivocally, stop the spending. Remember, during these bad economic times, the state continued to spend spend more. And this budget that the governor has proposed continues to spend more in each of the years. New York, in fact, is going back and reducing spending 2%. When I asked the Office of Fiscal Analysis, how much would we save if we went back to 2008 spending, and they said $2 billion. The shared pain argument doesn't really fly. The strong message we're getting is that they already have been in pain. 100,000 jobs were lost. We have a 9% unemployment rate, higher than the national average. The wrong place to go is to the public once again. That shared sacrifice has not been shared at the state employee union level.
I'm going to be feeling a lot of pain if I don't take this break. When we come back, we'll talk about the proposals that you're going to be putting forth. Back in just a minute. Stay with us.
Message that we can send. You got your deal? I got my deal.
Welcome back to Focus on Connecticut. We were discussing it all through the break, but I'll let you finish what you were saying.
No, in fact, I'm very concerned because in this budget is embedded 4 different proposals that would differentiate Connecticut. We would be the only state to enact a luxury tax on clothes, jewelry, and cars. We would be the only state to require mandatory time off for part-time employees, including in our YMCAs. We would be the only state to tax electric generation, and one of the few states in the union to have a fuel gross receipts tax of 8.1%. That differentiates us in a negative way. We're already considered business unfriendly. This would exacerbate this and actually erode our competitive edge when we really should be needing to regain that edge. And it is all about tax policy.
Well, and it's said that the Democrats are going to make some changes and at least propose some changes in their version of the budget. Are they going to be along these lines of cutting back on taxes?
Well, I hope so, and we'll see ultimately what happens. But let me just go back to the state employees portion of it that Senator Boucher had mentioned. You know, the governor, in his original budget proposal, had cut spending by about $800 million, and that goes on top of the spending that we've reduced over the last couple of years. His actual state-to-state spending, state-to-state spending actually goes down. The budget number, the gross number goes up because we're grabbing about $400 million of federal revenue that he believes is left on the table. He's asking for state employees to come back with $1 billion a year in concessions. And if you look at it, they're a $5 billion cost center for us in the state. So you're asking state employees to come back with a 20% give back of something, whether it's for health care, whether it's for wages, whatever it's for, and then the rest is made up through revenue. Now, some people will say, well, how come Governor Cuomo or Governor Christie have been able to do this without raising taxes? Well, first of all, they have higher tax rates than we do. Secondly, what Christie has done is that he has pushed all of this down onto the local levels. So we have $2 billion we spend per year on secondary education for reimbursements. We want to cut that. That's fine, but that's going to go back down to the property taxes. Businesses have told me, look, we'd rather spend a little bit more on the state level for some of our business taxes rather than have it pushed down to the property taxes, because that burden for us would be much higher on the property tax level than it would be on any kind of business taxes that are out there. And I think, in fact, they would support that over business taxes any day of the week.
So how do you make these cuts without it coming home to roost, be it the education or municipality level?
Well, I think that we need to go further. Right now, what this particular proposal that's on the table looks at almost 60%, 59% in new tax increases. It has about 29% in union concessions and only 13% in spending cuts. That comes right from the governor's tax proposal for the budget. And I think that the public and the rest of us feel it should be the reverse. And there are many ways to go after this, not only to reduce spending across the board. We've got 43 agencies we can consolidate into 11. We've got all manners of things we should be approaching. Retirement age is only 55 in the state of Connecticut. It should be 65. We have health care co-pays that are so out of line with the public sector, the private sector, that it needs to be looked at. We have, even if we made it be synonymous and similar to the federal employee level, we could save a great deal of money. And an example is that a pharmaceutical drug that a federal employee might have a copay of $40. In the state of Connecticut, it would only be $8. So we have a lot of room there to make some serious cuts and changes. The consolidation is extremely important. We also don't have much in the way of staff reductions or hard hiring freezes. With only 150 people being targeted through some attrition and through some reductions and consolidations, we should be looking at that number in a much more serious way. Other states have done that, in fact. And as far as our competitive edge, again, I still maintain that tax policy is going to be the differentiator about our future health, economic health in Connecticut. Rhode Island just reduced their highest income tax to 5.9%. That governor basically said at his press conference he wants to be under Connecticut. He wants to attract Connecticut businesses and people.
And our governor has said he wants to remain below New York State.
New York is being reduced, by the way. They should know that. In 2012, they're also reducing their high tax rate.
It's scheduled to be reduced. But let me fact check a little bit of what my good friend said. It would save about $300 million a year for the state employees to do the federal health insurance. But let's also not forget that it was Governor Rowland almost 20 years ago who entered into that agreement with state employees. No chief executive would enter these days into a 20-year agreement with state employees. So that's on the table right now, as it needs to be. You can't expect everything to happen overnight. A lot of what my colleague just said about how to save things is things I believe Governor Malloy is trying to do right now with state employees. You can't say that you're going to save this money unless you have an agreement with state employees or you have layoffs. So you either have one or the other. And that's kind of the crux of the argument. Governor Malloy has said that he's going to reduce agencies. He's
sent out a letter
by 30%. No, he's going to reduce agencies by 30%. It's going to eliminate 150 positions right now. However, he's going to, I would assume, and I want to see this, and I know he does too, reduce even further positions through attrition or through other means by consolidating agencies, but you cannot do that until you have an agreement with state employees or you lay off. It's either one or the other. So I think what they're saying is good in a sense that of trying to save money, but you cannot do those things. You need two at the table, and you need two to tango here. And that's happening right now with him in the state employees.
A letter went out to the heads of his agency saying, get ready to reduce by 10%. And he points out, they're saying this is a tactic, you're putting pressure on the unions. No, you've got to give an 8-week advance notice to employees, senior employees. So we're playing by the rules. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about what that could mean for your constituents, for all of us here in Connecticut if we start cutting like that. Back in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Focus on Connecticut. I'm Tom Appleby, and our guests are State Senator Bob Duff, Democrat from the 25th District, State Senator Toni Boucher, Republican from the 26th. I left out your communities this time. That'll gain us 5 minutes at least. Hope so. Well, under this Plan B, they call it, the governor's Plan B, Connecticut cities and towns could lose a third of their state aid. The governor said first time around, I am not touching municipal aid. We're going to keep it at that level. I'm not touching educational cost formula. You're going to get that money.
Bob, I don't really think that, Tom, I don't really think that this is a serious proposal at all. What the public really gets is this, okay? In the last 10 to 20 years, ever since the income tax was put in, and that's why I focus on tax policy as being such a driver for our economy, we stopped gaining a population. We went to a flat job growth. And over that same period of time, government nearly doubled, both in the number of employees and spending went through the roof. The public gets that. And as a result, the promises being made, unfortunately right now, to the state employee unions may have been a factor in the last gubernatorial race. There's no question both the unions and the governor have publicly stated that he owes them. And that makes this negotiation a little bit more difficult. And I honestly believe that they certainly have been talking about the way in which they're going to orchestrate this. And I'm concerned about some of the messages. Certainly at all of these different town hall meetings, there was this outcry for taxing the rich. And this is what this plan actually does. And in fact, this reduction in the amount that you're going to get in your property taxes is going to be overlaid on increasing all the various brackets that have already put in place. Remember, this tax proposal starts taxing people at $50,000 and above at a very higher rate, and even higher as of this week. In addition, those at the lower rate are actually going to get a new entitlement program. They're going to get a check for between $1,700 and $600 for those that currently don't pay state income tax. This is, in our view, not the right direction to go. It's a disincentive to business. It certainly exacerbates our business unfriendly state reputation. And this income tax increases falls on small businesses more heavily than almost any other group.
There's also the argument that you tax the rich, they're going to leave, and then where are you going to be?
Well, you've got to have everything's got to balance to a certain extent, and but the funny thing is that if the governor feels that he owes the state employee unions because of the election, he's got a funny way of showing it by asking them for $1 billion back in concessions, which, by the way, is more than Governor Rowland ever did and Governor Rell ever did. Love it or hate it.
He was out marching with them over the weekend too. He's walking a very fine line.
Yes. He is walking a very fine line, but it's asking. If it was $1 billion and it were easy to do, I'm sure it would have been done by now. You're asking for a lot. You had state employees come to his budget hearings and criticize him for saying, look, you're proposing to raise my income tax, sales tax, and you're also asking me for a 20% give back somehow. How is that fair when I do everything that I can? So, a lot of this is balanced. Somebody the other day said to me, why don't you cut the state workforce by a third? I said, okay, we could probably do that. It would be on the ground, it would probably be pretty difficult, though, because we have, for instance, let's take Norwalk Community College. Their enrollment's up by about 25%. We have probably the same amount of instructors or less than we've had. We've flat funded them for the last 3 years, doing much more with less, but they're doing it, which is okay. We could reduce the amount of folks at the Department of Motor Vehicles. We could reduce the folks at the Department of Children and Families who protect our foster kids and respond if there's abuse. We could reduce the amount of people over Department of Social Services who care for our seniors and care for kids and for the other safety net programs that we have. We could reduce the number of folks over at the DOT who plow our roads and keep the litter off the streets and other types of things that we find important. We can do those things if people really want us to do those things. But I think at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, people are going to say, look, do your cuts, let's get that money from the state employees, and I'll pay a little bit more to make sure we continue the quality of life that we enjoy here in the state of Connecticut.
They're telling me to do my cut. One last cut. Take a break. When we come back, let's talk about when this is, if it comes out of committee as it's supposed to at the end of this month, where it'll be at. When all the smoke clears, what this budget will look like. Back in just a second. Alas, just a few minutes left when it's all said and done. January, you walk away at the end of the session on time for once. What's this budget going to look like?
That's a good question. I think it's still up in the air. I hope there's still a lot of room for negotiations and that they'll listen to all sides of this.
Well, they say they're not going to listen to the Republicans.
Well, and
they've said that this week.
That's unfortunate because when they say people don't vote with their feet, they're absolutely wrong because the demographics show it. When we had the state income tax, people left. They moved with their feet. When we put in the inheritance tax after trying to get rid of it, 12,000 people moved when the year before only 800 moved. We lost a congressional seat. That shows population. And the states that are gaining congressional seats actually have no state income taxes or estate tax. They have very favorable tax policy for both businesses and people. We in this state of Connecticut don't need to tighten our belts on an already inflated spending spree that we've been on. We need to go on a permanent diet to be thinner and healthier for the future, for the next generation of Connecticut people.
The budget by the end of the year.
Well, my hope is that we'll have a bipartisan budget, because I think that there's moderates on both sides of the aisle who would like to put together a budget, and folks like Senator Boucher, who would like to be part of the solution. There's going to be some on the Republican side. No matter what you do, it'll never be enough, and you could raise a 5-cent tax, and they'll say, well, taxes are being raised, so we're not going to support it. And that's not reasonable. So there needs to be some middle ground that we can all find that would work for all of us. Again, Connecticut we have good schools generally, though we have a large achievement gap, but we have good schools, we have a good quality of life here in the state. People expect services. We have people who are highly paid, highly skilled. We want to keep that. And the thing is that some other states, yes, maybe more favorable tax environment, but they don't have a lot of the same things we do. And, if we want to cut some of the things that we hold near and dear to our hearts, we can do that. But I think, again, at the end of the day, people like the standard of living that we have in the state of Connecticut and want to continue that. And the services that we have. Again, we have great higher education, we have great education, all those things.
If we do the kinds of cuts you're thinking of, will people a year from now say, oh my goodness, what did we do?
I don't think so. I think we're at a tipping point. The public does not want us to raise taxes. They want us to cut spending. And like Bob, and who he and I agree more than we disagree, and really are willing to work very closely together to look at the various proposals, and let's see if we can change the percentages of spending versus taxing. And I'd like to see us reach a greater portion of this is reducing in spending rather than taxing further, and maybe we can reach some middle ground.
And like I said, I think there's common ground. The Business Council of Fairfield County just sent out a memo saying that they support the framework of the governor's proposal. And I think that's good news. That's showing that his budget is not hostile to businesses. So we need to continue to tweak it, continue to work together, and get us out of this fiscal crisis and this fiscal mess and stop kicking the can down the road.
I hope we can work together when this is all said and done. I hope it's on time this year. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well. Please stay tuned. The news continues.